Hello everyone, Kurt Olford here and welcome back to another episode from Olford Labs. Today we continue on with Fiore's Azza section and we look at the last posta, the Posta di Fenestra, as far as the guards are concerned. In this right here, it shares similar qualities that we see within the sword section, as it's labeled as unstable and full of deceit and treachery, where it finds to find openings against an opponent. The difference as far as what we see in this portion, however, is it's on the left side, and it's not necessarily on the right side of the body that we've seen within the sword section so far. Also, the tip is not leveled towards the opponent, but rather up in the sky, which I have some ideas as to why that might be the case here, which we'll discuss later on in the video. But before we get into that, if you're new to the channel, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend out there, and leave a comment below about anything that you might be thinking about from this video or other videos that you've seen. Don't forget to hit the bell to be notified when new content drops. And if you're one of my regular viewers and subscribers, thank you so much for always stopping by and sharing your thoughts and feelings in regards to the work on this channel. With that being the case, everybody, let's take a look at this last posta, the Posta di Fenestra, and how it is similar and dissimilar to what we've seen within the sword section. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the last posta that Fiore gives us within the Azza section of his manuscript. And what we're talking about is the Posta di Fenestra, which appears to be a little bit different than what we've seen thus far from other fenestra positions. Interestingly enough, this right here, the Posta Fenestra itself, as you can tell, he talks about being withdrawn. The beak is still upwards in the image, although I don't think it really necessarily matters as far as how you can get your area for striking. But regardless, he has it up here into this position. His arm is pulled back as he tells the person to do, and he's very much so charged for either thrusting or striking from that position. Unlike other positions like with the sword, where you've got both hands over top or also the lance, the fenestra for the axe is not entangled within the arms. Now, again, if we think about this, this to me is a good balance about incorporating the weight of the weapon. So if I have it upwards a little bit and down, and the bottom portion down, it allows for stability for a very unstable guard. So as he says, this is a very unstable position, and even just assuming that with the very limited armor that I have, it does take quite a bit to hold it up in comparison to other things where I might just be holding it in my hands here. If I was doing this with my full armor, this is a lot more weight on here, and on top of that, it puts itself back into an unstable position because I'm pulled upwards into a different direction. So let's talk a little bit about some of the principalities of this right here too, some other connection points. One of the big things about this right here that I think is interesting and perhaps is something that Fiore never scripts and writes about is, when it comes to the sword, we see fenestra on this side. It makes me wonder if he's also saying that his fenestra would be like this on the left, or if he'd have it leveled out. We don't know because he doesn't have the image, all he does is mention it. And the only fenestra we see here on this side of the body is the axe position. So it's just something there to think about. I'm kind of curious what people have to think about that. So please put your thoughts in there whenever you wish. For this right here, again, fenestra is also a spot that he says is filled with probing, and for the action to be able to, charge different actions off of this. So just like when we came down to Posta Breve, which we can thrust out and create different things on this, it's very possible from fenestra, I can come here and pop down. I can come here, roll up underneath. I have the ability to kind of create that striking vector for a thrust in many forms and fashions. But he says that off this position right here, I can come from the left and then strike to the right. And that's where, again, the simplicity of this really comes into play, because essentially this fenestra, by being up here in this position, by just turning onto the other side, allows us to strike down to the right with relative ease. So because of that ability right there, as he says, I can probe. Maybe I'm setting these things up here. I'm threatening, turn, strike, and you have the ability to turn out of those types of areas by moving wise. It's also possible to go forward with this, where I can come across and then step and strike. It's also possible to go the other way if I'm trying to gain ground in other forms and fashions. Regardless, it's a very deceptive position, which allows for us to get into different types of closure areas to create options out of it. Now, a thing about this position right here that I think is actually quite interesting is that if I'm going to use Fenestra, like we talked about with the sword positions, where we're going to come up into an unstable position, right? Then essentially I can utilize this right here from any of the offline positions as I can sweep up into and go up and then strike right back down with deception. If we think about how we might be crossing this way with an axe, so it'd be coming this way at me, then by coming across from here up and under, it allows for us to be able to play with a variety of different actions. From your Posta Breve, popping up, striking out to the right, from your Mezzaport di Ferro, popping up and then striking around to the right. Lots of options right here. And because it's so tight to the body, it's easy to redirect the axe with great ease. It also allows to keep the headspace of the weapon away from us so I don't bonk myself or club myself or spike myself, because it's popping up away from me, well out of reach of anything that's out there. So from this position here, again, we can also set up, we could also decide to cause thrust from above and then turn right back down with strikes. Very deceptive, very quick, but again, to Fiore's point, it's not stable. And again, one of the things I think about with Instabile is that the requirement to hold up a position of the axe here, right? It takes muscular action, and if I'm withdrawing the arm as he tells me to do, pulling it tight away from me, then we are looking at ways right here that could be very limiting and damaging to us. There's another thing about Fenestra, and it's not written in the book, but it makes me think about this because of how the axe position itself is not necessarily limited to left and right-handed positions. A big part for me on this right here is that it's one of the ways I like to do it as far as for movement-wise. So I encourage people to play with it, but I figured it'd be kind of a nice thing to do here because it is nasty, and it is one of the ways that I feel inspired by by what Fiore is saying here as far as deception goes. So if I can come up into a window guard, come across and strike right back down because I can feign and go to the other side, then there's nothing saying that I can't use that as a way to go right back to the same side here. What this looks like is from here, over top here, and now I've struck from the same side that I came on, but transitioned into a rear position, which allows for other probing mechanisms. So again, from this side here, you can see as I'm here, I do that turn where I can come across and strike, and it pops me right back into position. Again, it's one of the things that made the Maestro's plays have inspired me, is because essentially from this position, if it's got no stability and it's full of trickery, perhaps this is one of the ways in which we can deceive somebody utilizing an axe which weighs more than a person's attack vector. So as you can see with the video, the Posta di Fenestra is a dynamic position that is not difficult to use as far as position-wise, but it does require us to restrain backwards as far as our arms and whatnot. Now, it doesn't seem like that's a big task to do, but you got to remember, depending on the circumstances of the man-at-arms, the knight, whatever, that they may find themselves in these types of positions, the reality is you may not have a long time to be able to do certain things from this striking area. And that is something right there that is to consider, because you are in an unstable position. Remember, for how I see the unstable positions, what that means is that we are extended, moved off, our basis is off, or we are muscularly engaged to hold a weapon, or whatever the case might be, away from us in an upwards or outward position, which allows for us to be able to project and also ward off in different directions as far as threat goes. But that comes at a cost of being able to hold that up and shifting the balance of our body because of the weight of that structure. Now, when it comes down to Posta Fenestra, when it comes to the Azza, I don't know if this is the case or not, and I'd be very curious about what people think about this, but when it comes down to the position of this right here, we notice that the right hand is on top of the axe, and we're on the left side of the body. Unlike when we talk about being on the right side of the body where it's crisscrossed, right? But again, the right hand is on top of the grip portion, which allows us to keep that steady hand forward. I think that's a very interesting portion when it comes down to this, because the reality is, when it comes down to the usage of this, Fiore's system always to me feels like it's about simplicity of action, and that because ultimately you don't have time to do any type of fancy work out there, you really just want to be able to shift and move very quickly. And if this is the position right here from Posta di Donna over here to Posta di Fenestra, it makes a lot of sense, especially with a weapon that's cross-bodied to the person. That's a key indicator right here, and this might be one of the reasons why the axe is, it's up in the air, is because essentially if you rotate the arms around, you are basically in Posta di Donna. And that is a key factor because from there, like you said, from here you feign, you come right around and you strike to the right side of the body. Now with the sword, we don't necessarily see that because essentially from this side right here, I can also switch around very quick and I'm in Posta di Donna where the blade is a little bit closer or more horizontal to my line structure or even behind my back. So it basically is keeping that line in shape. That's a key factor right here that I think is about we were trying to get the weapon out as fast as possible to deploy it into a direction so that I don't have to sit there and work my hands to try to get a better striking angle. Instead, we have something that's right there that just basically with the volt of the body, I'm able to reposition and strike, presumably out of nowhere. So that's a big part about this. And there's no evidence that supports that necessarily that this is his left fenestra for the sword. However, again, that could be one of the reasons why. Another reason why is because if we talk about weight, right? So this is the thing right here. If the weight of this right here, if I'm holding this, and this is just so people know, this is a Todd's Workshop Custille sword, really nice. But the weight of this portion right here, if I'm holding it here, the weight is in the handle. When I put it to the hand, the weight is now in the handle, so that's not in the tip. So this might be part of the reason why with the axe, we're keeping it upright because we want to keep the weight upward. So we're not having if I'm over here, that might be dragging my arm down and making my armor fight itself as I'm holding that position. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person can't move around as quickly as possible. It just means that these are things right here he may be thinking about. It's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And simplicity of action is always the better. This leads to the last thing I talked about as far as the deception action from this position. Now, again, Fiore, at the brass tacks of what Fiore is stating right here, I believe what he's saying is you can threaten from the left and then turn and come right over to the right really fast. I believe this goes to both sides because, as previously mentioned, I don't believe, and this is what was given to me, this is not a Curtism, I don't believe that the axe or pole arms are side-oriented. So there's not, like, you don't have to carry the axe or the lance on one side, as we'll see later on. It's a dynamic usage of this, and you may find yourself in different grips that allow you to play to somebody's weak side, bad side, whatever the case may be, in different form and function. So essentially, the application to be able to come here and striking around, that doesn't mean that I can't come to the other side, use a right fenestra, and then come across and strike to the left. So there's that first application that's right there. The other application, it revolves around the concept of being able to turn and then strike to the same side in which I came from, which allows me to switch back and forth in different form and fashion. Mind you, that's a Curtism as far as like just, I've used that in sparring and just playing with the idea of using the axe in multi-direction aspects, because the thing is, it's very devastating, and if used properly, the axe can be very, very, very tricky to track because you have this big thread object right here with the head, the cross of the axe, right? And we sometimes don't necessarily see the dagger portion of that, which can be misleading. So again, coming here and then shifting over right across is another way to be able to strike with the axe. But being able to switch hands in this right here, I believe is important because as we see in later concepts, we're not talking about the swords where the sword is not bisecting the body. We're talking about a pole arm where my body is always bisected in some form or fashion with the axe. So to switch to the other side, I want to make sure that I switch my grip to the other side, because the reality is, if I don't, I start doing things like here where my arm's tucked underneath. And while this is certainly something that could be done, it's also very limiting and I have to uncoil this. Whereas if I come across and shift, I'm back into fighting form here and I'm not tangled up with my arms. Could this be one of the uses of the Posta Fenestra? I tend to believe so in that case. But again, we have no context here other than just exploration of the movement within the Posta. So that's going to do it for this video right here. And again, please let me know what your thoughts are on this. What did you think about the transitional concepts I'm seeing here about swapping hands from side to side when using Posta Fenestra? What are your thoughts about why the Fenestra is up in the air versus leveled out at the point right here? Have you used this position in sparring? What successes have you found? Is it difficult to use? I know for me, it's a very tricky one. It's one that I specifically have a hard time getting around certain people on because of how dynamic it has the potential to be. And again, those are just some of the things that I observe with the axe. So again, leave a comment below. And as always, until I see you, please be safe out there, train well, and fight on. I'll see you all soon.